The ongoing fight for our schools and what it has to do with our Constitution. That is the topic of tonight's byline. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If we're going to win the culture war that is going on in Canada, we need to know our history. We need to know about our Constitution. Talked a bit about that last night on the program. Well, today, I went down to the legislative hearings for a controversial bill, and I asked a few questions of our politicians, the esteemed elected leaders that we put in place. All I can say is, wow. Either we have elected some dim bulbs or we have elected liars. It's one or the other. Now, I'm not new to this game. I know politicians are full of it, and I mean politicians on all sides. But I actually heard a member of Ontario's legislature say that we had to pass a bill to protect charter rights, and then when questioned on the constitutionality of the bill said he wasn't there to talk about the Constitution. I mean, sure, that whole charter thing is part of the Constitution, but the rest of the document, meh. But I'll get back to that in a moment. First off, the bill they were studying is Bill 13. This is Dalton McGuinty's anti-bullying legislation for Ontario. Now, we're all against bullying, right? Everyone is. Well, except the bullies. But is that the real mission of this bill? No. This bill is all about an agenda. This bill will force every school to set up and let students run clubs on their own, meaning without the teachers. And the purpose of these clubs, even if it's not in the name, is to have gay-straight alliances. Now, as several presenters have pointed out, homosexuality is not the main cause of bullying in schools, not by a long shot. That would be body image. But this bill is about a political agenda. One of the presenters, Dr. Tim Lau, a psychiatrist, raised many valid points about the bill, including the fact that as student-led clubs, which the legislation calls for, who will be responsible for what goes on? The legislation says the clubs must be student-led.
Who's supervising these kids and these activities? I think there is definitely a concern from the point of view of liability when you have organizations and activities that are totally student-driven without any oversight.
Now, Dr. Lau pointed out in his presentation to some of the material that's out there and promoted on the websites that back the creation of these gay-straight alliance clubs. Here's a website, here's part of it from mygsa.ca, which is supported by, among others, the teachers' unions across Ontario. It's looking for young men to get stoned and have sex. Yep, that's right. Young and full of spunk. That's not a student support group. That's a hookup service for stoners. Will this sort of thing be supervised properly in these clubs? I doubt it. Another presenter this morning was Alan Hubley. You likely remember Alan. He's been on this show before. He's a hard-working city councillor here in Ottawa and a good guy. Alan and his family lost their son Jamie last year. Jamie had been dealing with mental health problems. He'd been struggling with many issues, including his sexuality, and he committed suicide. Now, Jamie's name has been used to push these clubs, which once they hit Ontario will spread. Alan once again told the committee to back away from forcing gay-straight alliances on all schools and just focus on stopping bullying for all kids. I think Alan has a point here, even if the Liberals and the NDP are too ideologically driven to hear it. And what the activists behind this bill and this movement have made clear is that they want to use this issue to take down Ontario's Catholic school system by forcing it to accept secular doctrines that go against their religion. And here's where the Constitution comes in. You don't need to be Catholic to be bothered by this. This should be bothersome on many levels. Catholic schools are being told they have to accept that which goes against their faith in order to stop discrimination, even though that itself is a form of discrimination. Now, that doesn't bother Liberal MPP Yasser Naqvi, who was holding court with the media today. It also doesn't bother Naqvi that this bill likely violates Section 93 of the Constitution, which states that nothing in any such law shall prejudicially affect any right or privilege with respect to denominational schools, which any class of persons have by law in the province at the Union. You had these schools at the time of Confederation? That's it. The province can't legislate against them. Well, this will be a violation of that section of the Constitution. What does Naqvi say about this?
I'm not going to get into the constitutional issues. We need to make sure that we respect all students. I'm not a constitutional lawyer.
This man, who is a lawyer, by the way, this man had just finished saying this is all about protecting human rights, the ones laid out in the Charter, which, as I said earlier, is part of the Constitution. Then he says, well, I'm not here to talk about the Constitution. This goes to my point that I've made before. Progressives, be they liberals or New Democrats, or even those progressives inside conservative ranks, they love the charter, but they hate the Constitution. The fact is, they're hoping this bill gets challenged and heads to court. Progressive Conservative MPP Lisa MacLeod says the Liberals are making that very clear.
Well, the Liberals don't want to have that conversation, particularly the activists in the Liberal Party like Glenn Murray. They want to force this into the courts. That's what.
And Glenn Murray, the Dalton McGuinty's junior minister for colleges, has made it clear he really wants this in the courts. He wants this to become a fight. Now, I want you to take two things away from this. McGuinty's move here is not about stopping bullying. There are 5 previous laws passed to stop bullying, and more laws won't stop kids from being mean to each other. And if we're just about stopping bullying, then there's another bill which doesn't mention gay-straight alliance clubs or violate religious rights. Now, this bill is about pushing a sexual political agenda and smashing any opposition in the way, using the courts and legislature, overturning the Constitution if they have to. Right now, the main opposition is the Catholic school system, and that makes them the target. Now, whether you're Catholic or not, support those schools or not, this story should bother you. It is an agenda. It is agenda politics at its worst, and it's using our children as pawns. And that's the byline. Joining me now for further discussion on this is Faye Saunier. She's with the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada and a lawyer. Faye, you were at the committee hearings this morning as part of the presentation. Your group, you don't have a publicly funded school system, but you're still opposing this. What was the thrust of your presentation?
Well, we made 3 points in particular. The first point was that people should stop using the word homophobe to label anyone who has a problem with Bill 13. We have journalists who are calling our office now looking for comment on Bill 13 or critique, and they're relating to us that no one will speak out against any portion of it because they're being labeled homophobe and they're being silenced. Secondly, we addressed the issue of the bill. The bill tends to focus on bullying of some students over others, and the mandatory GSA groups, for example, that are listed into it, the concern listed in the bill about homophobia 3 times, a word that isn't defined jurisprudentially or legislatively in law. And
so meaning that when it does go before the courts, it can be defined however that court on that day sees fit.
Well, even before that, I'm concerned about its application now. How are the teachers or school officials going to determine what's homophobic and what's not? There's no definition out there that'll stand up. And so we commented on that, and we really commented on the fact that any effort by the Ontario legislature to reduce bullying in schools should be done in a way that that's inclusive, truly inclusive, and seeks to protect all students from any forms of bullying and not put primary focus on some over others.
Now, in previous presentations on this, the Evangelical Fellowship has pointed to research done for the Toronto District School Board, which said bullying is primarily about body image. That's the #1 issue that happens on body image. Why this focus away from what the main issue really is?
I'm not sure, and we brought that up this morning as well. And what's more interesting is that a University of Toronto study that recently came out on cyberbullying confirms those findings. The top 3 reasons for bullying in Canada are body image, grades or marks, or cultural identity or background. So it really makes you question what the motives are behind the legislators behind Bill 13. And I think it should be motivation for us to really look at Bill 14, the anti-bullying legislation put forth by the Progressive Conservatives, and consider that as a real option.
Now, that bill is just straight up, let's end bullying for all, correct?
That's right.
Is it a perfect bill? Does it have problems as well? Or does it just walk that line and say, let's treat everyone equally?
In my opinion, it's a much better bill. For example, the definition of bullying used in Bill 13 is legislatively just completely problematic. There's legal landmines everywhere. The definition in Bill 14 isn't loaded. It's very clear, it's simple, it's easy for school officials to understand and apply to the different situations that will arise within their schools.
Okay, we've talked about the importance of having clear legislation on this program recently as it relates to the Firearms Act and as it relates to getting rid of the gun registry. You've got a chief firearms officer out there saying, I can keep going with the gun registry because the language is vague. Explain we'll end with this. Explain the importance of having very crisp, clear language when you're passing a bill, especially one that is going to be litigated and is going to be loaded like these are.
Well, I think there's 2 possible consequences. The consequences are for the students who may be accused of homophobia or bullying that may not in fact actually be bullying, what you and I would consider bullying, for example. Some parents are concerned that if their students talk about what their children are heard in Sunday school or at church on Sunday about marriage or love or the structure of family, that might be captured under the definition of bullying in Bill 13. And then the second concern, of course, is this is going to lead to years of litigation. Taxpayers' money could be better spent, equipping schools with teachers, with resources, with counselors, with, books and pencils, than fighting this in court.
All right. It looks like we are headed to court, though, if they go this way. Sonia, thanks so much.